Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Scott. I'm an attorney. I have an M.B.A. I have a C.P.A. But kind of probably most important to this group is that I am also an entrepreneur. I used to work in an investment bank for many years. I used to work at Credit Suisse. I used to write accounting opinions for business transactions, so very familiar with the business side. Then I had the long-burning desire to go to law school. And so I left my investment banking job, went to Harvard Law School, graduated, and the plan when I started law school was really to go back to investment banking. But when I started law school, I realized that there was it was just my passion and that I was put on this planet to be a lawyer. So left after law school, went and worked in a large law firm for a short period of time, about a year, and then started my own practice. So now we have a few employees and a few lawyers, a few paralegals, and so everything's going really well. Just as an aside before we start the presentation, one thing about being an entrepreneur, I think that, there are entrepreneurs like, Facebook entrepreneur, there's just, Gates, there are lots of entrepreneurs, but, an entrepreneur can really be anybody who's really starting their business. And what I, encourage you to do is if you do want to be an entrepreneur, that you do it and pick a passion of yours and actually explore that passion. Because as I work, I feel like I actually don't work, that, I'm actually doing something that I really, really love. So in terms of the presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to explore the life of Donald and Ivana. And Donald and Ivana are two people that they want to start a business together, and they have kind of, similar goals. They are a little different, and we'll go through some facts, because I think that the way that we're going to do this is we're going to do it more like a case study. We're going to give you some facts, and then we're going to go through the application of some legal factors. So the presentation is really going to focus on taking a look at two people who want to start a business and going through the legal implications and some of the legal issues associated with them starting a business. Now, the one thing that is unusual, or the kind of addition to this presentation, is that Ivana is not a U.S. citizen, and Ivana is a Swiss national. So we're also going to spend the first part of the presentation talking about immigration and kind of her ability to work in this country, and then move on to the legal aspects. So some facts. So as I said, Donald, he's a U.S. citizen. Ivana is a Swiss citizen. They both go to Pace University. Ivana is a computer science major. That's going to be important because when we talk about some of the options, the immigration options for Ivana, computer science is one option that gives her more options. And Donald is in the entrepreneurship program. Ivana is on an F1 visa, so that's the student visa for people who are not from this country. And another thing that's going to be important when we talk about the immigration consequences is Ivana, she's quite accomplished. She's won a number of national and international competitions related to coding, and she's published in a few academic journals. Donald and Ivana are dating, and so there's no relationship to Donald and Ivana Trump. So that might actually be before some of your time, like Donald Trump used to be married to Ivana Trump, but it's just that they have the same first names. And they have a great business idea. They've developed a mobile application that is going to change the world. So a couple of things. Donald, he's registered a business, but he's done it as a sole proprietorship. So we're going to talk through whether that's a good idea and maybe some other options. Ivana, she's also registered a business, and her friend mentioned something to her about an S selection, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, what exactly that means. They've decided to work together, and then, like most partners that start a business together, Donald and Ivana really get along well. And Ivana was just commenting to a friend, saying that her and Donald are always on the same page, and in fact, especially when it comes to business, that they are, really on the same page. Now, Ivana, while she's in school, she actually volunteers a couple days a week at a tech startup, and we're going to talk about that and kind of, from an immigration perspective, whether or not she is able to do that. Now, Donald has a little bit of money in the bank. Ivana has a lot more money in the bank, and again, we're going to use that to kind of go through some of the immigration issues. So the first kind of question the rhetorical question, if not a question. Can Ivana work in the United States? And the clear answer is no, she can't. She can't work in the United States unless she has a visa. And in fact, what may come as a surprise to people is you can't even volunteer in the United States if you don't have a visa. You're not allowed to. You could be barred for 10 years for what Ivana is currently doing. So what are some of Ivana's visa options? So the first visa option for Ivana is that she could get married to Donald. And Donald is a US citizen, and it's a visa option that is a great one because she will not only have a green card in a year, she would get work authorization within 90 days. And all of her issues would be solved. And in fact, marriage kind of in the United States, it's one of the few immigration categories that really forgives everything. If you're in the United States undocumented for 20 years and working and you marry somebody, the government says, we're going to forgive everything, and you kind of move forward. And that's, it's the only category that actually permits that. So it is one. Now, in terms of marriage, the other kind of interesting thing about marriage is that the definition of marriage in the United States is not that two people love each other, and there's a really interesting case that dealt with it, and it was about a caregiver that was married to someone and they were not in love, they were just living together, and the judge said that that's as good a reason as any to be married, and the definition is that you plan on spending a long-term life together. So. Now, this next option is B1 and F1. Now, so Ivana is on an F1 visa, and we'll cover this fairly quickly, but after she graduates, she's already granted kind of 12 months that she's able to to live and work in the United States, and she can work really anywhere. She can start her own business, she can work for anybody else, but it is only 12 months. But because Ivana is a science major, and you may have heard of this in terms of the push in the technology industry to allow more talent to come to the United States, there's something called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And because she's a computer science major, she can actually apply for another almost 18 months. So in total, she can actually work after she graduates for about 30 months without problem. And again, she can do anything and work for anyone during that time, including starting her own business. A B visa, that's really just a tourist visa, but that's also an option for students when they leave. They can either transfer from an F status to a B status, or they can leave the country and re-enter on a B status. But the problem with the B visa is that it doesn't permit you to work. You can be here, you can go to tourist attractions, you can do all of that, but you can't work in the United States. So the next visa, and this is a really popular visa, and I happen just to be talking about this visa to somebody, just before I came into this class, and it's called an E2 visa. And what this visa is, it's an investment visa. Now, Ivana has $100,000 in the bank. Now, what Ivana can do is she can invest in the United States. So she would have to get office space. She might have to, buy some equipment. But Ivana could spend around $20,000 in the United States and then put $80,000 in a business bank account, and that would be sufficient for her to get an E2 visa. A couple things with the E2 visa, though, is that you have to be a national of a treaty country. So Switzerland happens to be a treaty country, and there are many other countries that are treaty countries. Two countries that are the most populous countries, unfortunately, are not. India and China are not. So if you're from India or you're from China, you have to explore other visa options. But there are many, many countries on the list. The other thing with this visa is that you have to, the business can't be a business that is just set up to support you and your family. So you have to put together a comprehensive business plan. Normally the business plans that we put together for our clients, they're in excess of 40 pages. It has to be a credible business plan. And you have to show the government that you plan on creating US jobs. The next visa, you probably heard about this visa. It's a lot of controversy associated with this visa because it's a visa where many complain that someone can buy citizenship or buy a green card, and I guess it's correct, but because of the way that the visa is structured, it is beneficial for the U.S. economy. So what this visa is if you invest $500,000 or $1 million, and the determination of how much you invest depends on where you are in the country. So if you're in what's called a troubled economic area, and that's defined by unemployment rate of 1.5 times the national average, then you only have to invest $500,000. If you're in any other area, then you're required to invest $1 million. So you have to invest that in the business, But then the business actually has to, in a 2-year period, create 10 full-time jobs. And so that's full-time is full-time. It's not a combination of part-time jobs. It's not, you can pay them anything you want. You can pay them minimum wage, but you have to create at least 10 full-time jobs. So what the government does is they give you a green card, but it's a conditional green card. And then after 2 years, you have to file another immigration petition and show the government that you actually have created those 10 jobs. And if you haven't created the 10 jobs, they would just take the visa away from you. But it's a, it's a popular visa with a lot of foreign national students. They have, again, India and China are 2 countries that can't get an E2 visa. A lot of parents will, gift the money to their children. It doesn't have to be money that you earned. It can be a gift from a parent. Will gift the money to their children, and those applications are very, very popular. The O1 visa, it's another visa that's available to, in particular, someone like Ivana. So we saw in the fact pattern in this case that Ivana was quite accomplished. She had published things in publications. She had won a number of competitions. And what this visa is, it's a visa that really says that the individual has risen to the top of their profession, and the government is taking a look at this person and really wants them to stay in the country. So as long as the person is actually going to do what it is that they are good at, or they've demonstrated that they're good at, then they can get this visa, or this visa may be available to them. It can be renewed indefinitely, but the one problem with this visa, it's a very, very, very difficult visa to get. It's a very subjective visa as well, because what is good, what is exceptional. But it is a very, very difficult visa to get, but one that that is available for students, and in this case, perhaps Ivana. The last visa that we're going to talk about is the H1B visa, and this is probably the most popular visa for students. And the reason it's the most popular visa for students is because it has a relatively low bar. So the bar for this visa, all of the other visas, I'm going through them very quickly in terms of what the requirements are. However, I could spend an hour talking about each of them. With the H1B visa, though, the requirement is just that you have to have a bachelor's degree. Or the job rather has to have a bachelor's degree. So that sometimes can be quite easily demonstrated. If the job is for a C.P.A. or an accountant, it can be really easily demonstrated, because if the job is one that needs a bachelor's degree, then it's easy to demonstrate that. Sometimes for some professions, like if you have a bachelor's degree, but then we had one person that came to us and wanted to get an H1B visa, and he was a chef, and he had a bachelor's degree from a good school. He was a good chef, but the government wasn't satisfied that the job that he was doing actually required a bachelor's degree. The one thing to keep in mind with this visa, though, is that way more people want this visa than there are visas available. So it's the only visa, it's one of for the purpose of this discussion, it's the only visa in this on this board where there's a quota, where the quota is actually used. So last year there were 85,000 spots available, and within the first 5 days, and they don't, if you file on day 5, it's as if you filed on day 1. So within the first 5 days, they received 125,000 applications. So they just returned, they just returned the they did a lottery, said, okay, your petition gets adjudicated, and the remainder they just returned to the applicants. And that happened last year as well. And we expect the H1B season's coming up again in April, and we expect it to happen again. And it's really unfortunate because my firm had a number of H1B petitions that we filed last year, and some were for students, and that was their only ability to work in the United States. So when they didn't even get selected, they didn't really have, some of them actually went back to school, but they didn't really have any other option. So those are really the visa options. There are other visa options, but those are really the visa options that are available to Ivana.